Admiral Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of his warship and watched his world die. Through the large windows, he could see the planet New Geneva burning below. Orange flames covered the cities where millions of humans had once lived happy lives. Now those same cities were nothing but smoke and fire. The alien ships hung in space like giant metal monsters. Their dark hulls blocked out the stars, and bright flashes of weapons fire lit up the darkness. The Zephyrian Empire had been hunting humans for 3 long years. They wanted to kill every last person in the galaxy. Captain Lisa Rodriguez ran up to Morrison with tears in her eyes. Her uniform was torn and dirty from the long battle. She held a small computer pad in her shaking hands. "Sir, we have the final count," she said in a quiet voice. "We started this war with 12 colonies. New Geneva is the last one. If we lose here, there won't be anywhere left for humans to live." Morrison nodded slowly. He had gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much death. 3 years ago, he had been a peaceful man who explored new worlds. Now he was a soldier fighting for the survival of his entire species. The bridge crew worked at their stations with grim faces. They all knew this would probably be their last battle. Outside, the human fleet was tiny compared to the alien armada. 18 human ships faced over 200 Zephyrian warships. It was like trying to stop an ocean with a bucket. Commander Ryan Hughes led the small human fleet in the space battle. His voice crackled over the radio as he gave orders to the other ships. Hughes was young but brave, and he had kept the human fleet together through the worst fighting of the war. "All ships, this is Hughes." His voice came through the speakers. "The last transport ships are almost ready to leave. We need to keep fighting for 15 more minutes. Every second we hold them back means more people get away." Morrison looked at the screen showing the evacuation ships. Thousands of people were packed into cargo holds and passenger decks. Families hugged each other as they waited to escape. Children cried for parents who would never see them again. These ships carried the last hope for humanity. The alien commander sent a message to all the human ships. The voice was cold and electronic, translated by computers into human language. "Humans, you have fought well, but your time is over. Surrender now and we will make your deaths quick. Continue fighting and we will hunt down every one of your escape ships." Morrison picked up his microphone. The entire human fleet waited to hear what he would say. Around him, his bridge crew stopped working and listened. "This is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Defense Coalition. We have a message for you too. Humans don't surrender. Humans don't give up. And humans don't run away when our families need us to fight. You want to destroy us? Come and try." The bridge crew cheered, and Morrison could hear similar cheers from the other ships over the radio. The fear was still there, but so was something else. Pride. Determination. The stubborn human refusal to quit even when everything looked hopeless. The battle began again with new fury. The human ships were smaller and faster than the alien vessels. They darted between the giant enemy ships like angry wasps, firing their weapons at weak spots in the alien armor. Every hit counted because the humans had so few ships left. Captain Rodriguez worked at her station, coordinating the defense. She had been born on New Geneva and had played in the parks that were now burning. Her family was on one of the evacuation ships, and she would never see them again if the fleet failed here. The alien ships fired their plasma weapons in deadly waves. The energy beams could slice through metal like a hot knife through butter. One by one, human ships exploded in bright flashes of light. Each explosion meant dozens of brave people had died fighting for their species. Hughes led a desperate attack on one of the largest alien ships. His small destroyer raced straight at the enemy vessel, firing everything he had. The alien ship was 10 times larger, but Hughes knew where to hit it. His weapons found the power core, and the massive alien ship exploded like a dying star. "One down, too many to go," Hughes said over the radio. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the sadness behind his words. Morrison watched the tactical display as more red dots disappeared. Each red dot was a human ship. Each disappearing dot was friends and comrades who would never go home. The Admiral felt the weight of command like a mountain on his shoulders. The last evacuation ship finally cleared the planet's atmosphere. Thousands of human refugees were now racing toward the edge of the solar system, hoping to find safety in the distant frontier worlds. The fleet had done its job, but the cost had been terrible. "Sir," Rodriguez said quietly, "all civilians are away. We can begin our final attack run." Morrison looked around his bridge one last time. These people had served with him for 3 years. They had become like family. Now they would all die together, but they would die as humans, fighting to the end. All ships, this is Morrison. Our people are safe. Now we show these aliens what happens when they threaten human families. Attack pattern Omega. Give them everything we have. The remaining human ships turned toward the alien fleet. They were outnumbered 10-1, but they attacked anyway. The space around New Geneva lit up with weapons fire as the last human fleet charged into battle. Morrison thought about Earth, the beautiful blue world where humanity had been born. He thought about all the colonies that had been destroyed, all the people who had died. But he also thought about the children on the evacuation ships who would grow up free because of what happened here today. The aliens had superior numbers and better weapons, but they had never faced anything like human determination. As the Valiant shook under enemy fire, Morrison smiled. Humanity might be losing this battle, but the war was far from over. The stars watched in silence as the small human fleet fought against impossible odds, buying time for their species with their lives. In the darkness of space, hope seemed lost forever. But sometimes when hope fades away completely, something even stronger takes its place. 6 months had passed since the last human fleet died at New Geneva. Captain Amy Clark floated in the command center of a converted cargo ship, looking out at the asteroid field that had become their temporary home. Chunks of rock drifted past like sleeping giants, hiding the small group of refugee ships from alien patrol vessels. The ship smelled of too many people living in too small a space. Families had made homes in cargo holds using old blankets and metal sheets. Children played quietly in the corridors, their laughter muffled because everyone knew that loud noises might give them away. Clark was 35 years old with short brown hair and tired eyes. Before the war, she had been a cargo pilot moving supplies between colonies. Now she commanded a fleet of 12 ships carrying 3,000 of the last humans in the galaxy. The responsibility felt like a weight that grew heavier every day. "Captain, we're getting low on water again," said Lieutenant Ben Parker, her second in command. Parker was young and tried to stay positive, but Clark could see the worry in his face. "The recycling systems are breaking down faster than we can fix them." Clark nodded and made another mark on her clipboard. Water, food, medicine, fuel. Everything was running out and there was nowhere to get more. The Zephyrian Empire had declared the entire frontier region off limits. Any ship caught trading with human refugees would be destroyed. On the mining station called Outpost 7, former Admiral Morrison tried to keep hope alive among his people. The station had been abandoned for years before the refugees found it. The air recyclers barely worked, and the heating system failed every few days. But it was home to almost 2,000 survivors. Morrison walked through the crowded living areas, stopping to talk with families and check on the sick. He was no longer an admiral commanding mighty warships. Now he was just an old man trying to keep his people alive one more day. A little girl named Lucy tugged on his jacket. She had blonde hair and big blue eyes that reminded Morrison of his own granddaughter, who had died on Earth when the aliens first attacked. "Mr. Morrison," Lucy asked, "when are we going home?" Morrison knelt down to her level. How could he explain to a 6-year-old that home didn't exist anymore? That Earth was a burned rock floating in space and all the colonies were destroyed? "We're going to make a new home, Lucy," he said gently. "Somewhere safe where you can play outside and see real sunshine." Lucy smiled and ran back to her parents. Morrison stood up slowly, feeling every one of his 60 years. He had told the child a lie, but sometimes lies were kinder than truth. Dr. Kevin Walsh worked in his medical bay on the station, treating patients with equipment that belonged in a museum. He had once been one of the top weapons scientists in human space, designing the plasma cannons and shield systems that protected the colonies. Now he used his steady hands to set broken bones and treat infections with expired medicine. A woman brought her baby to Walsh. The child was sick with fever and had been crying for hours. Walsh examined the infant carefully, knowing that he had only basic antibiotics left. In the old days, this would have been cured with a simple injection. Now it might be a death sentence. "I'll do everything I can," Walsh promised the mother. As she left with her baby, Walsh made a note in his private journal. Another child at risk because they didn't have proper medical supplies. The list was getting longer every day. Lieutenant Colonel Helen Barnes led her team through the ruins of an abandoned mining complex on a dead moon. They were searching for anything useful: food packages that hadn't spoiled, medical supplies, fuel cells for their ships. Barnes was a tough woman with scars on her face from the last battle at New Geneva. "Check every room," she told her team. "Even if it looks empty, there might be something we can use." The mining complex was dark and cold. Their flashlights made strange shadows on the walls as they searched. After hours of looking, they found a small storage room with cases of emergency rations. The food was 3 years past its expiration date, but it was still better than starving. Barnes remembered when she had been a colonel commanding a regiment of Marines. Now she led a scavenging team that included a former banker, a school teacher, and a teenager who had learned to fight during the war. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were just people trying to survive. The winter season was approaching on the moon where many of the refugees had built shelters. The old mining tunnels provided some protection from the cold, but they would need more fuel to heat their living areas. Barnes knew that some of the older people and smaller children might not survive another harsh winter. The refugee leaders held a meeting in Morrison's office on Outpost 7. The news from all the groups was the same: food running out, medicine almost gone, ships breaking down without spare parts, people losing hope. "We have maybe 3 months left," Clark reported over the video link from her ship. "After that, we'll have to start making hard choices about who gets fed and who doesn't." Walsh shared his medical reports. Disease was spreading through the crowded refugee ships. Without proper medicine, a simple flu could kill dozens of people. The elderly were dying first, but the children would be next. Barnes had scouted several possible hiding places, but all of them had problems. Either they were too exposed to alien patrols, or they didn't have the resources the survivors needed. Every option seemed like choosing between different ways to die. Morrison looked at the faces on his screen. These were good people who had fought bravely and suffered greatly. They deserved better than slowly wasting away in the darkness between stars. But what could he do? They had no weapons to fight with, no ships to escape in, and nowhere safe to go. "We keep trying," Morrison said finally. "We keep looking for supplies, keep searching for a safe place to settle. As long as we're alive, there's still hope." But privately, Morrison wondered if hope was enough. The human race had once dreamed of spreading across the galaxy, building cities on 1,000 worlds. Now they were reduced to a few thousand people hiding in the darkness, counting their remaining days in terms of food and water. Outside the station windows, the stars shone with cold light. Somewhere among those stars, alien ships hunted for the last humans, and somewhere else, perhaps, was a miracle that could save them all. Dr. Kevin Walsh crawled through the dark ventilation shaft of the abandoned research station on Titan Base, following a map he had found in the old records. His flashlight beam cut through the dusty air as he searched for the hidden vault that supposedly contained medical supplies. He was desperate enough to try anything that might help his dying patients. The research station had been empty for over 4 years, since before the war began. Most of the valuable equipment had been removed long ago, but Walsh hoped that something useful might have been left behind in the deeper levels. His people needed medicine, and he was running out of places to look. Walsh found the vault door exactly where the map said it would be, behind a fake wall panel in the lower storage area. The heavy metal door was locked with both electronic and mechanical systems, but years of neglect had weakened the seals. Using tools from his medical kit and pure determination, Walsh managed to force the door open. Inside the vault, Walsh expected to find medical supplies or research equipment. Instead, he discovered something that made his hands shake with excitement. Rows of metal cabinets contained thousands of classified files marked with the words Project Exodus and security stamps he had never seen before. The first file he opened made him sit down hard on the dusty floor. Project Exodus had been a secret program run by Earth's government during the years before the war. The project's goal was to build a hidden fleet of advanced warships that could survive, even if humanity lost the war. According to the files, Earth's best scientists and engineers had worked in complete secrecy to develop new weapons, shields, and faster-than-light travel systems, but the most incredible part was the fleet itself. The documents described hundreds of advanced warships hidden in a pocket dimension, waiting for the day when humanity would need them most. Walsh read through file after file, hardly believing what he was seeing. The ships were equipped with technology that was decades ahead of anything humans had possessed during the war. Weapons that could punch through any alien armor, shields that could stop the most powerful enemy attacks, and something called dimensional storage that could hide an entire fleet from enemy sensors. The files contained activation codes, coordinates, and detailed instructions for accessing the hidden fleet. But there was one major problem. Opening the dimensional gateway required enormous amounts of power, more than any single ship could produce. It would take the combined energy output of dozens of vessels working together. Walsh carefully gathered all the files and made his way back to the main refugee camp. His mind was racing with possibilities, but he forced himself to be careful. If this was real, it could save humanity. If it was just the fantasy of desperate scientists, it could get a lot of people killed. Commander Jake Phillips was working on repairs to one of the refugee ships when Walsh found him. Phillips was a former Special Forces officer with graying hair and strong hands that were equally good at fighting and fixing machines. He had become the camp's chief engineer because he could make old equipment work when everyone else had given up. "Jake, I need you to look at something," Walsh said quietly, pulling Phillips aside. "But first I need to know if you ever heard of Project Exodus." Phillips stopped working and looked at Walsh with surprise. "Where did you hear that name?" "Exodus was classified above my level, but I remember the security detail work. Strange shipments that disappeared into empty space. Materials and equipment that went nowhere according to the official records." Walsh showed Phillips the files. Watching the tough soldier's face change from skepticism to amazement to something that might have been hope, Phillips had the security clearance to verify the authenticity of the documents, and his military training helped him understand the technical specifications. "This is real," Phillips said finally. "I can't believe it, but this is real. The government really did build a secret fleet and hide it somewhere in dimensional space." The two men spent hours going through the files together, checking and double-checking the information. The fleet was hidden at coordinates that corresponded to an empty region of space, about 50 light-years from their current location. The ships were maintained by advanced artificial intelligence systems that had been keeping them ready for decades. When Walsh and Phillips finally decided to share their discovery with the other leaders, the reaction was mixed. Captain Clark was interested but cautious. She had learned not to trust anything that seemed too good to be true. The coordinates were deep in space, far from any safe hiding places. If they were wrong about this, the journey would kill them all. Admiral Morrison was more optimistic. He remembered rumors about secret projects during his years in the military, though he had never been involved directly. The idea of a hidden fleet matched the kind of long-term planning that Earth's government had been known for. Colonel Barnes was skeptical. She had been betrayed by false intelligence too many times during the war, but she also knew that their current situation was hopeless. If there was even a small chance that the fleet existed, they had to take the risk. The debate continued for weeks as the refugee leaders argued about what to do. Some wanted to investigate the coordinates immediately. Others insisted on finding more proof before risking everyone's lives. The discussions became heated as fear and hope battled in every heart. The breakthrough came when they received a coded transmission from another group of survivors. Colonel Steve Martinez had been leading a small band of refugees who were hiding in the ruins of a destroyed Zephyrian research station. His message changed everything. Martinez reported that his people had discovered alien technology that could amplify power output far beyond normal levels. The aliens had been working on similar dimensional research, trying to understand the same principles that Earth scientists had used for Project Exodus. "We can combine our power systems with their amplification technology," Martinez explained over the encrypted radio link. "It might be enough to open the gateway." Suddenly, the impossible seemed possible. The scattered refugee groups began making plans to meet at the coordinates specified in the Project Exodus files. It would be dangerous to move so many ships through space controlled by alien patrols, but they had run out of safe options. Walsh worked feverishly to understand the technical requirements for opening the dimensional gateway. The power had to be channeled in exactly the right way, at precisely the right frequency, or the entire fleet could be destroyed. But for the first time in months, he felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. As the refugee ships prepared for the journey to the hidden coordinates, Walsh looked once more at the Project Exodus files. Earth scientists had planned for this day, believing that humanity would survive even the worst defeat. Soon they would find out if that faith had been justified. The dimensional gateway opened like a crack in reality itself, revealing something that took away the breath of every human who saw it. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of his refugee ship, watching in amazement as space itself seemed to tear apart. Through the glowing tier, he could see something that looked like a vast shipyard, floating in endless darkness. Captain Amy Clark brought her small fleet closer to the gateway, following the exact procedures outlined in the Project Exodus files. The energy readings from their combined ships were off the charts, but the alien amplification technology was holding steady. Step by step, they were opening a door that had been sealed for over a decade. "My God," whispered Dr. Walsh as the full scope of the hidden facility became visible. "It's bigger than anything we ever imagined." The space beyond the gateway contained hundreds of warships arranged in perfect formations. Each vessel was sleek and deadly, with hull designs that incorporated technology far beyond what humanity had possessed during the war. The ships hung motionless in the dimensional pocket, waiting like sleeping giants for someone to wake them up. Admiral Morrison's refugee ship was the first to pass through the gateway. As soon as they crossed the threshold, automated systems came online throughout the hidden facility. Lights began flickering on across the vast fleet, and mechanical arms extended to guide the arriving refugee ships to docking platforms. A voice spoke from the communication system, clear and almost human, but with a subtle electronic quality that marked it as artificial intelligence. "Welcome, Admiral Morrison. I am Athena, the fleet management system. I have been waiting for your arrival." Morrison felt his heart pound as he listened to the AI. After months of desperation and slow death, they had found something that might actually save them. But he had to be careful. This could still be some kind of trap. "Athena, this is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Defense Coalition. Can you confirm the status of the fleet?" "All vessels are operational and ready for combat deployment," Athena replied. "I have maintained the ships and continued development programs during the years of your absence. The fleet now consists of 412 vessels with capabilities that exceed your original specifications. As more refugee ships passed through the gateway, the survivors got their first close look at their new home. The hidden facility was like a small city in space with manufacturing areas, living quarters, and training facilities. Everything was clean and well-maintained, kept in perfect condition by the AI and its army of maintenance robots. Commander Jake Phillips docked his ship at one of the larger platforms and immediately began exploring the nearest warship. The vessel was called the HNS Retribution, and it was like nothing he had ever seen. The bridge was filled with advanced displays and control systems that seemed to respond to his thoughts as much as his touch. "Phillips to Morrison," he called over the radio. "Sir, you need to see this. These ships are incredible. The weapon systems alone are 50 years ahead of anything we had during the war." Morrison took a shuttle to the Retribution and found Phillips, standing in the ship's command center with a look of wonder on his face. The bridge was spacious and efficient, with stations for a crew of only 20 people. According to the displays, the ship could operate with even fewer people if necessary. Athena's voice came from speakers throughout the ship. "Admiral Morrison, please allow me to brief you on the fleet's capabilities. Each vessel is equipped with quantum phase weapons that can penetrate Zephyrian shields. The armor uses adaptive response technology that becomes stronger when attacked, and the faster-than-light systems can outrun any known alien vessel. As the days passed, more refugee groups arrived through the dimensional gateway. Colonel Steve Martinez brought his people and their alien technology, which integrated perfectly with the human systems. Captain Clark began assigning refugees to different ships, matching people's skills with the vessels that needed crews. Dr. Walsh found himself appointed as the fleet's chief science officer, working directly with Athena to understand the advanced medical and research facilities. The AI had continued developing new technologies during the years of isolation, creating medical systems that could heal injuries that would have been fatal before. The refugees worked frantically to learn how to operate their new ships. The vessels were designed to compensate for smaller crews, with artificial intelligence systems handling most routine operations. A ship that would have needed 300 people during the war could now be operated effectively by 50. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, who had survived the fall of New Geneva, found herself promoted to tactical division leader. She stood in the fleet's command center, looking at displays that showed the position and status of every ship. The coordination systems were so advanced that the entire fleet could move and fight as if controlled by a single mind. The sensors can detect Zephyrian ships at ranges we never thought possible, Rodriguez explained to Morrison during one of their briefings. And the targeting systems can coordinate attacks between multiple ships with precision that's almost supernatural. Colonel Helen Barnes was assigned to train the civilian volunteers in combat operations. The training simulators were incredibly realistic, allowing people to learn complex battle tactics in days instead of months. Even former office workers and teachers were becoming effective warriors under Barnes's tough but fair instruction. The most amazing discovery came when Walsh explored the research laboratories. Athena had been conducting experiments for years, developing new weapons and defensive systems. Some of the projects were still theoretical, but others were ready for immediate deployment. "Show me the gravitic weapons," Walsh asked Athena during one of his tours. The gravitic systems can create localized gravity fields that can crush enemy ships or deflect their weapons, Athena explained as holographic displays showed the weapons in action. However, they require enormous amounts of power and are still in the testing phase. As word of the hidden fleet spread among the scattered refugee groups, more survivors began making the dangerous journey to the dimensional gateway. Each arrival brought new skills and manpower, making the fleet stronger. Mechanics, engineers, pilots, soldiers, and civilians all found roles in humanity's new war machine. Morrison stood in his new command center aboard the Retribution, looking at status reports from across the fleet. For the first time since the war began, humanity had ships that were superior to alien technology. They had weapons that could hurt their enemies and shields that could protect their people. But the best part was the change in his people's faces. The despair was gone, replaced by determination and something that had been missing for too long: hope. The refugees were transforming from defeated survivors into a fighting force that could strike back at their enemies. "Athena," Morrison said, "how long until the fleet is ready for combat operations?" "All ships can be ready for deployment within 72 hours, Admiral. The crews have adapted to the systems more quickly than projected." "Shall I begin preparing battle plans for operations against Zephyrian targets?" Morrison smiled for the first time in months. The aliens had thought they had destroyed humanity, but they had only made them stronger. The Ghost Fleet was awakening, and soon the Zephyrian Empire would learn what happened when they threatened human families. The Zephyrian Empire had grown lazy in their victory. For months, their patrols had found nothing but empty space and the occasional piece of wreckage from destroyed human ships. The alien commanders believed that humanity was finished, reduced to a few scattered refugees who posed no real threat to their vast empire. Admiral Jack Morrison smiled grimly as he watched the enemy supply convoy moving through the Kepler system. 25 Zephyrian cargo ships carried enough weapons and supplies to equip an entire battle fleet. They were protected by only 6 escort vessels, and their crews had become careless after months of routine patrol duty. "All ships, this is Morrison." The Admiral spoke into his communication system. "Target the escort vessels first. Leave the cargo ships intact. We need those supplies more than the aliens do." The attack came without warning. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel right on top of the alien convoy, their advanced ships appearing like ghosts materializing from the void. The Zephyrian escorts tried to raise their shields, but the quantum phase weapons punched through their defenses like they were made of paper. Captain Amy Clark led the first attack wing, her ship dancing between the cargo vessels as she targeted the alien weapon systems. The new ships responded to her commands with perfect precision, moving faster and more gracefully than anything she had ever flown before. "Direct hit on the command ship," reported Captain Lisa Rodriguez from the Fleet Command Center. "Enemy communications are jammed. They can't call for help." The battle was over in less than 20 minutes. The Zephyrian escorts were destroyed, and the cargo ships were captured intact. Human boarding parties, led by Colonel Helen Barnes, secured the vessels and began transferring supplies to the fleet. For the first time since the war began, humanity had more resources than they knew what to do with. Dr. Kevin Walsh examined the captured alien technology with fascination. The Zephyrians had been developing new weapons and defensive systems, some of which could be adapted for human use. More importantly, they had detailed maps showing the locations of every alien base and patrol route in the sector. "This intelligence is incredible," Walsh reported to Morrison. "We know exactly where they are and how strong their defenses are. We can hit them where they're weakest and avoid their main battle fleets." The success at Kepler was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, the human fleet struck at isolated alien outposts across a dozen star systems. Each attack was carefully planned to minimize alien casualties, while maximizing the damage to their military infrastructure. Commander Jake Phillips led lightning raids on communication stations, cutting off alien units from their command structure. Colonel Steve Martinez coordinated with resistance movements on occupied worlds, providing weapons and intelligence to help them fight back against their oppressors. The attacks continued with clockwork precision. The human ships would appear without warning, destroy their targets, and disappear back into the void before reinforcements could arrive. The aliens began to realize they were facing something far more dangerous than desperate refugees. Word of humanity's return spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. Other species that had been conquered or threatened by the Zephyrian Empire began to take notice. Ancient enemies of the aliens started sending secret messages offering intelligence and support. The Vorthan Republic, which had been fighting a losing war against the Zephyrians for 2 years, was the first to make official contact. Their ambassador met with Morrison aboard the Retribution, offering a military alliance against their common enemy. "Your fleet has accomplished more in 1 month than our entire military has managed in 2 years, the Vorthan ambassador said. "Together we can drive the Zephyrians back to their home systems." Similar offers came from a dozen other species. The Crystalline Collective provided advanced sensor technology. The Nomad clans shared intelligence about Zephyrian weak points. The Ghost Fleet was becoming the center of a growing coalition of free worlds. Morrison found himself not just commanding a human fleet, but leading an alliance that stretched across half the galaxy. The tactical displays in his command center showed allied ships from dozens of different species, all united in their determination to stop Zephyrian expansion. The aliens finally responded with a massive counterattack. 3 full battle fleets converged on the Rigel system, where human forces had been helping to liberate an occupied world. The Zephyrian commander was Admiral Vextar, the same alien who had destroyed Earth and conquered the human colonies. "This is Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet," came the cold electronic voice over the communication channels. "Humans, you have caused enough trouble. Surrender now, and I will grant you the quick death you should have received months ago." Morrison looked at the tactical display showing over 300 alien ships arranged in battle formation. It was the largest fleet the Zephyrians had, assembled since the conquest of Earth. But humanity was no longer the weak species that had been defeated 3 years ago. "This is Admiral Morrison of the Human Liberation Fleet," he replied. "You destroyed our worlds and murdered our families. Now you want us to surrender? Here's our answer." The human fleet charged into battle with their alien allies beside them. The space around Rigel became a maze of weapon fire and exploding ships as 2 of the galaxy's most powerful forces collided. The battle raged for hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Captain Clark led a desperate attack on the Zephyrian flagship, weaving through a storm of plasma fire to get close enough for a killing shot. The alien dreadnought was massive, but its shields couldn't handle the concentrated fire from a dozen human ships working in perfect coordination. Colonel Barnes coordinated the marine assault that captured the alien command ship. Human soldiers fought their way through the corridors room by room until they reached the bridge where Admiral Vextar made his last stand. The alien commander died fighting, but his death marked the beginning of the end for Zephyrian power. As the alien flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, the remaining Zephyrian ships began to retreat. Their formation broke apart as ship after ship fled toward the edge of the system. The mighty fleet that had conquered Earth was running away from the humans they had once defeated. Dr. Walsh watched the enemy retreat from his position in the medical bay, where he was treating wounded from both sides. Human and alien casualties lay side by side, receiving the same careful treatment. It was a small sign that this war might end differently than it had begun. The liberation of the Rigel system was just the beginning. As news of the Zephyrian defeat spread, rebellions broke out on occupied worlds throughout the galaxy. The Ghost Fleet had become a symbol of hope for every species that had been conquered or threatened by the alien empire. Morrison stood in his command center, looking at a tactical display that showed the changing balance of power across the galaxy. Red zones marking Zephyrian control were shrinking daily, replaced by the green indicators of liberated worlds. The war was far from over, but for the first time, humanity and their allies were winning. Human Marines were already landing on New Geneva, beginning the long process of rebuilding their devastated homeworld. Children who had been born in the refugee camps would finally see the planet their parents had died defending. The circle was closing, and hope had returned to the galaxy. The species that had once faced extinction was now leading a coalition of free worlds against tyranny. In the darkest hour, when all hope seemed lost, humanity had found something stronger than despair. They had found each other, and they had found the will to fight back.